Welcome to the Cover Your Assets podcast, a show for the physician who understands the importance of protecting everything you've worked so hard to achieve. If you're ready to find the peace of mind that only financial security can bring, let's get started. Here's your host, Billy Gwaltney.
Hello, welcome to today's episode of the Cover Your Assets podcast. I'm Billy Gwaltney, your host. I appreciate your time. It's good to be with you today as always. In today's episode, we're covering session 2 of our educational series called Cover Your Assets from All Angles. In this session, we'll go over financial goals and personal values. Take a listen, take a watch with the financial advisors that I interviewed recently. Hope you find this helpful. Hey, welcome to everybody who's joining this Cover Your Assets from All Angles. My name is Billy Gwaltney. You know me. Everyone that's attending this was invited by me or clients of mine that I'm helping or have helped with disability insurance, specialty disability coverage, and I help most clients or a lot of clients with life insurance as well. And then what comes up over and over and over again are questions related to financial topics, retirement planning, financial planning. Do I know anyone? What about other kinds of insurance? Those kind of things. And so I want to welcome you for being a part of this and participating. I just wanted to offer this as a way to help. I do have some relationships with people, having been in the financial services business for a couple of decades now, that are really good at what they do. John and Kyle are two of those people. And so I've asked them to join so that we can offer an educational platform for fun and for free to my clients and anyone else that they and you guys and folks invited to be a part of this. And I'm just doing it because I want to, because I can, because I have these resources and I just want to help any way I can. I feel compelled to do that. And John and Kyle are on here because I've gotten to know them from a personal standpoint, their character. They're also independent. They are financial advisors. Kyle is in Texas. John is in Tennessee, in Nashville. Kyle's in San Antonio. And they own their own firms, have been doing it quite a while. John actually retired and came back because he got bored, and Kyle probably could do the same thing. And so they're not needy and greedy. They're pretty picky about who they work with. And so they do not have any of my clients or the folks that are participating or joining this. They don't have any contact information for them. So you're here anonymously, and they just are going to offer some of their expertise and insights based on the topics that we're covering. This is a 4-part series. Last time we went over the first session where we talked, it was basically an introduction to the understanding financial mindsets. This session today is on financial goals and personal values, which we'll cover today. And then we've got 2 more sessions. Session 3 will be financial tools and strategies. And then session 4 will be traditional and principles-based approach to risk management. So today we're on session 2. Just to quickly summarize what we did in session 1, there, as far as I can tell, and having been around this a long time, and I think Kyle and John agree with this, there are essentially 2 types or approaches to financial planning and financial affairs. There's the traditional approach. I wish we could come up with a better term, but I couldn't come up with anything more creative than that. But it seems to fit the way that, that a lot of people approach things regarding investing and budgeting and retirement planning and those kind of things. And then there's the non-traditional approach, which is a little more outside the box. And we covered what the similarities are to those and then what the differences are. So feel free to check out that recording if you want, and it'll become clear what the pluses and minuses or similarities and differences are as we continue to discuss tonight and in the future sessions. So that's enough for me. I'm going to now turn it over to Kyle. I'll start with you as we go into session 2, where we're talking about kind of the first step. How do you talk with clients to start to determine what it is that they want to do, need to do, what they're looking for, and kind of the deep dive into understanding what goals are and what their values are So I'll let you run with that, you being in the non-traditional approach, and feel free to add to that. And then we'll let John share some of his approach as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. So our approach is initially when we first have a meeting with a client, we generally have already sent them a link to a questionnaire to fill out, a list of documents to gather, and they come prepared for that first meeting, typically with all of that information. The first stage of our planning process we call the elements, and it's because we're kind of gathering in all of the elements, the financial information as well as the mentality of the client that we're working with. So probably the biggest part of that first meeting that we have with the client is finding out their objectives, their concerns, what are they trying to accomplish, and what would they like us to help them with. And so we go through that. If we spent the entire first meeting just talking about those things, that's super important to us. We're not trying to rush through that just so that we can get to something that we want to talk about. So that's super important for us to really find out where the person is that we're talking to and what's important to them. And in 25 years of doing financial planning, I can tell you that no two people have had the exact same responses in that session. So that's super important. We introduce some foundational principles, which is why we call our process a principles-based planning process. Everything that we do is rooted in financial principles that I believe have stood the test of time and are common among people who are highly successful financially. And so we introduce some basic financial principles in that first meeting. And then subsequent meetings after that, we go into the application of those principles and also addressing all of the objectives and concerns that the clients have brought up in that first meeting. So it's the application. Thomas Sowell, I don't know if any of you know who Thomas Sowell is, but he's a great economist. I think he's one of the smartest people on the earth today. But he wrote a book called Basic Economics, and it's funny because I was on the airplane reading it a few months ago, finishing the book, and somebody commented sitting next to me that didn't look like a very basic book because it was like 634 pages. So
a basic economic. Okay.
Yeah, basic economics.
Basic. Yeah. Right. Right.
That's just the intro, right?
Yeah, that's just the intro.
That was the intro.
But it's a fantastic book. But anyway, one of the things that Thomas Sowell brings up in the beginning is he says, the principles related to economics are pretty easy to understand. It's the application of those principles that becomes more complicated and more difficult. And I would say that that's true with the financial principles that I teach. I think that, it's the agreement of the principles is what's easy. What's more difficult is putting that into practice, and how does that apply to these decisions that I'm faced with financially. So that's what the subsequent meetings are that we go through in the initial phase of the principles-based planning process, is applying those 5 foundational principles on a holistic level, looking at every aspect of the person's plan from A to Z, and then implementing what we can. By the end of the initial phase of the planning process, the client isn't perfect. They haven't accomplished every goal. They're not financially free usually by the end of that few months or few weeks, however long it takes. So it's a process of applying that, continually going forward. By the end of it, though, my hope is that the client walks away with a different mindset, with a more clear understanding of their own financial situation and the options that they have and how they can become financially free applying these principles. And it's a great process.
And you were almost saying that you're going to be financially free in 3 months. And I said, I'm going over by Kyle. I'm going to go through his approach if I can be financially free in 3 months.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
Man, I'm thankful to be here. I'm excited to share some information and see if we can help some people. So I want to start a little bit we didn't go very deep into classifying how Kyle and I are different.
Right. Yep.
We agree on a lot of the same stuff. I think, and Kyle, I want you to go deeper in this if I misstate how it works, but I think one of the biggest differences between the way we approach financial planning is Kyle's is probably a little bit more hands-on, whereas when we talk about me with the traditional approach, I'm more of a guy where you would bring assets to us. We would look at your portfolio, we'd analyze the portfolio, and then we would invest it for you. Where Kyle, I think, is going to help us, look at what those financial principles are, but then maybe apply it a little bit more tactfully or make it a little bit more personal with knowledge that you know. Is that fair to say? And then Billy, I'm happy to answer the question. So I'll come back. I just want to make sure I give Kyle a chance to state what he does so I don't misstate what he does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we have, and I'm sure we'll get to this at some point, maybe in the next session, maybe today, but I have 3 rules for investing that we teach in our process. And those 3 rules generally point to people investing their money into things that they are knowledgeable in, that they have control of, that they have some influence over the outcome. And the last rule, which is don't chase returns. So we talk about all 3 of those. That becomes a criteria, kind of an initial criteria for any type of investing. So I personally have no pony in the race, so to speak, as far as where my clients invest. I don't really care where they invest, honestly. I just want them to be successful. And I believe that these rules, the 3 rules for investing, are extremely applicable and are born of people who have repeatedly had great success investing.
Perfect. Thank you. And then for me, if we go a little bit deeper, ours does look like the more traditional approach from a financial planning standpoint, where we're going to have you come in. Our first meeting is similar to Kyle's from a standpoint of we're going to do something called your vision and values. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about what's important to you about money. What are you trying to achieve? When do you want to get there? What are some of the things you value? And that is probably the biggest difference in our practice. So now if you compare me to the rest of the world in the financial industry, I spent, I don't know, probably the better part of 25 years trying not to admit that I was a financial planner or a wealth advisor because I didn't want to look like everybody else. And we don't act or treat people like everybody else. So we do something we call lead with our heart. And we do something else called we do money differently. So we're going to lead with our heart. We're going to figure out what's on your heart, help you create a plan that you can spend more time doing that. So I know we have a lot of doctors here, and the physician industry probably is similar to Kyle from a standpoint of, hey, I'm going to get into my physician practice. I'm going to work that practice, and then maybe I'm going to see Kyle and, do some outside stuff in real estate or do something else that I know or is tangible. For me, I'm going to say, I want to help you figure out what you love to do, and then I want you to go do it. So there is medicine, of course, but that's probably one thing because a lot of us also like to play golf, travel, pickleball, blah, 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 blah. Those are the things I want to make sure I incorporate, but we'll take you through a process where you don't have to worry about your money. So we'll invest the money. We'll help you, again, create a strategy that is perfect for you. We talk about what the tools are, what the pros and cons are, but really the first couple of meetings, really the first meeting for sure, is an hour long of understanding what you want. So we don't talk at you, we talk with you. I don't tell you what to do, I teach you what to do. You pick what you want to do or where you want to invest. But so you're in control. I'm just taking you by the hand, and I'm partner, coach, guide. It's probably a different definition. So
Right. So both of you, the reason I asked you to participate in this is because you've done it a long time. You have your own firm. You kind of, you call the shots for who you want to work with, and you've seen a lot. And in your experience, when you're talking with a physician or maybe one who's an employee or one who's in a private practice, maybe they have some ownership, maybe their career's growing, expanding. Do you find that when you get into this conversation about goals that they usually have answers for that? Have they thought about it? Are you asking them questions that they haven't thought of before? Or do they usually come prepared to go, here's where I want to go. Here's what I want it to look like. Can you help me get there? Whoever wants to ask, I don't know. John, yeah, go ahead, John.
I'll go. I would say it's a process. So depending how old they are, some might come and say, hey, this is exactly what I want. I know exactly what I want to do. We talked about this in the opening. You talked about retiring. I'm 58 years old and I'm still trying to seek out, what am I going to do next? What's fun on the calendar? Where am I going? So I think there's a lot of people that it's going to ebb and flow. When you start, in your early 20s or late 20s, let's say, the first goal might be getting out of debt because there's probably some debt attached to where you are. But then as we start to enter our 30s, there's probably partners that come around. There might be children that come into the picture. There's homes. So we start to plan around that. And then as we age, people start, I'm not a big believer in retiring. So we call it a freedom number. So we want to get you to that number so that you can say whenever you want, hey, I'm done doing this and I have enough resources to go do whatever I want to do. So instead of calling it retirement, we call it a freedom number because I think you still have to be engaged. I think it's important still to be participating in the community. I think it's important to be around people. I think it's good just to not check out, because if you check out, and I'll bet you your people, Billy, could tell us a lot more than I could about this. I think if the people who retire early, it shortens your lifespan by 12 years or something. It's not a good thing. We've got to stay engaged. And I'm a fan of the Blue Zone. I don't know if you guys have read that book. You ever read that book?
No.
Blue Zone is an area, there's 5 areas in the world where they have the most centurions. So the most people live more than 100 years old.
Interesting.
They are engaged, they're active, they're spiritual, they believe in some kind of higher power, they're confident, but they have a purpose. So it's finding that purpose. And if your purpose is to be a physician or to work in that particular career the rest of your life, get in it, love it, but find time where you create balance so you're not always in it. But if it's doing something else, that's what we have a tendency to help folks do. We say, hey, we'll help you take care of your money and we'll help you guide to some of those things that you may love to do.
Kyle, what's your experience in that in terms of people's readiness to kind of piggybacking on what John said?
Yeah, I think just in the 25 years I've been doing planning, I would say that people generally have for the most part, a vague idea of what they're trying to accomplish, whether that's, hey, one day I want to retire, I want to be able to retire, I want to travel, I want to donate more to charities, things like that. Have they thought about it specifically or with very much clarity? I would say for the most part, no. And I would say that when couples come in, one of the values that I would say the majority of my clients state to me anyway, they verbalize to me, is how important it was for them, for like a husband and wife or a significant other, to be on the same page, that now they're finally talking about it and they're sometimes surprised at what the other person really wanted to do, what they want to accomplish in life. So I think the topic of money for a lot of, in married couples or people that are living together, oftentimes is a negative conversation. It becomes accusatory or there's a little distrust. I mean, there's a reason that the issue of money is one of the top reasons why people get a divorce. And part of that is that they're not really talking about it and they're not really clear about what they're trying to accomplish. So that's one of the most important things I think that happens in the initial part of our planning process is we have quite a lot of a conversation about financial freedom. We don't use the term retirement, and we could talk about why that is, but I don't think that retirement is really a great goal. I'm not saying you don't ever want to quit your job and do something else. I'm just saying I think from a financial perspective, financial freedom is the target that most people want. They want capability, they want the ability to do things, and that's what we would call financial freedom. The question that I guess for the audience is, to think more clearly about is, what am I going to do when I become financially free? What is it that's important about that? Who's involved? Who's going to be affected by me becoming financially free besides just myself? How's it going to affect my spouse? How's it going to affect my kids or the people that I care about? What am I going to do with my time? What am I going to do more of? What am I going to do less of? Where would I like to use my resources? How would I like to? The more clear that is, the more motivating it is. Something I tell all my clients is that whatever's most clear in your life, that's where your money is going to go. So if the future, which is what financial planning is all about, if the future is unclear in your mind, it's not very motivating. And to become financially free, that's a pretty big hill to climb. And there's a lot of sacrifice involved. There's a lot of dedication involved. And if you don't know why you want to accomplish that, or what's the consequence if you don't accomplish that, if that's not a big enough issue, then you're probably not motivated enough to become financially free. So I really think that that's important to get clarity on that.
So what is
It
the
also-
difference in saving for retirement and becoming financially free? I've heard you both say that, be it freedom versus retirement. And apparently there's a significant difference between those two.
I would say they're similar to me. They're similar from the standpoint, or I just don't like the word retirement because similar to Kyle, I think I would rather have enough money set aside that I can go do whatever I want to do. And to me, that's a freedom number. So we could look at it and say, all right, and we still do retirement planning. A lot of people are still looking to retire. They want to, but they're doing it to get out of something painful most of the time, not going to something joyful. So they're escaping a job they don't like versus trying to, be purposeful or something else. So for me, if you're looking and saying, hey, I need $150,000 in retirement, I need that to come in every single month, whether you are retired or you are 42 years old, it doesn't matter. If you have, so to generate $150,000, you probably need, I don't know, $3 million. If we're not counting Social Security, $3 million at 5%.
You said per month. I guess you mean per year.
Per year. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, not 150 a month. Sorry.
That's okay.
That would be a nice lifestyle. Yeah. Some people have that goals, right? I mean, it's a good one.
Right.
Well, you would definitely be financially free if you got 150,000 a month, as long as you're not going crazy and buying yachts and airplanes. But yeah, so the freedom number is very, very similar to the retirement number in my book. Okay. Kyle may say something different, but yeah, once you have enough money, then you can go do what you want. And to me, that's freedom.
Okay. Interesting. When I'm talking with clients and, I have ongoing conversations with them through the years as they graduate, I usually start working with them when they're in training, residency or fellowship, and then they become an attending. And I've noticed this sense of almost, they've been so focused on training. I mean, that's like consumed, you go through medical school, you take these boards, you do the training, 60 hours, 80 hours a week, however many hours a week, doing overnight shifts and all this. And they're so consumed by that, then they wake up toward the end of the training and there's almost this apology. Like I feel like they go, hey, I don't really understand a whole lot of this. And there's this almost sheepish kind of confession that I don't, I know I need to get insurance. I don't fully understand how it works. I think I need life insurance. I have no idea how much or what that does. And I think I need to get my financial affairs in order. They call it adulting. They call it, they kind of joke about it. And so there's this sense of they really don't know because they've not stopped or been able to stop long enough to really think about it. And then they get this significant bump in income and they've got this window. And this is one reason I'm doing this series is just to offer, they got this 20-year window or 30-year window to kind of, that if they do it right, they could do something special, right? But they got to be focused. You got to begin with the end in mind. You got to know where you're going. You can't just drift. You're not going to drift there. And so the question becomes, how do you paint that picture when you're just starting painting? And so I assume it evolves over time. Is that true? I mean, the goals change as they get into John, you mentioned getting in their 40s after their 30s and into their 50s, and their view on life changes. Have you experienced that?
Okay. Well, because they're trying to figure it out too. And the other thing that happens is it's not just physicians and the medical people. We don't get taught this anywhere in school. Nobody teaches financial planning. They teach us how to make the money, but they don't tell us what to do after we make it, right? The other thing that's a big bone crusher is trying to keep up with the Joneses, their image. And I see this with physicians sometimes too, where they think, oh my gosh, I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to have this car and I'm supposed to do this lifestyle and have this house. So my suggestion would be to make sure you create good habits in the beginning. And we talked last time about the richest man in Babylon. which is basically save 10%, tithe 10%, and invest 10%. If you live 30% below your income, you will not have a problem and you will have plenty of money in the future, even if you don't know what you want to do yet. So create good habits and good systems, good processes, and you'll have the outcome. So we just have to
Even
live
in the
below our means.
meantime.
Even in the
That's a
meantime,
good
do you
word.
figure it
Right.
out? It's also easier to save for something. Like if I'm sitting here and I'm 29 years old and I'm going, okay, I got an extra $300 in my bank account. What do I do? Do I go downtown tonight or do I put that in my, HSA or my savings account? Well, if I were 29, I might be going, I'm going to go downtown and see if I can find a date or, do something. Whereas if I said, no, I'm saving that for a boat or I'm saving that for something fun that I want, it'll make a bigger difference. You'll have a purpose for saving it.
Yeah, I mean, the question was, do people's desires, their goals, the things that they're focused on change over time? And I would say absolutely. I mean, anybody who was single at some point in their life and then became married, suddenly that's a huge difference. Now you're not just focused on what you want. And then when you have a child, your life changes again. And, you know, and then if there's issues like over time, you see people dealing with different types of struggles in life. Maybe MS becomes important to you, or diabetes, or cancer, or something like that. And so you find causes that over time you might want to shift your attention or have some focus on that. As your kids get older and you see their education coming and you're saying, holy cow, how are they going to pay for this? Or houses, that's kind of the more recent issue. The price of homes in the United States is becoming something that's out of reach for the next generation, right? So maybe we're going to see what's similar to what's been happening in college, where parents help with their kids' first time home purchase, right?
Right.
So I think that obviously things change over time, people's desires. Life throws us curveballs. Like, I don't think anybody that I've ever talked to has said, wow, I'm exactly where I thought I would be right in this moment, in every aspect of my life. Nothing, really works that way. So planning is about being on top of things. It's having flexibility. It's having the ability to change and move things, which, when we get into products and strategies, you'll find that I'm kind of biased against retirement plans. Well, there's a reason for that. And I think that part of that is the lack of flexibility, the lack of being able to move with the changes that occur in a person's life. I don't know. Does that help? Is that the answer?
That's good. That's good. Yeah. When it comes to goal planning, do you encourage like short, medium, and long-term goals? Do you divvy them out? Do you say, hey, let's focus on the short term first? You need to get a certain amount in savings or whatever, and then we do these other things? Or do you kind of tackle it all at once? Or how does it depend on the person?
John, do you want me to go first on this one?
Go ahead,
Sure,
Kyle.
I feel like I've been talking too much. So
Okay.
you go first.
You're fine. You're fine.
All right. All right. Well, that's what the principles are for, in my opinion. And I think that's a big difference between traditional planning and principles-based planning. Is principles-based planning is really addressing all aspects at the same time. It's addressing the short-term, things that come up. So just as an example, when we talk about our principle number 4, which is it's our liquidity principle, there are certain places that we can store liquidity in the United States, and they vary in what they're capable of doing. Some places are more conveniently accessible, but they kind of penalize you long term. They're not as efficient long term. Maybe they get eroded more easily because they don't grow. They're affected by inflation, et cetera. And other places might be more efficient long term, but they don't really affect, you can't buy your groceries with the money that's in those types of accounts. So, we want to plan based on principles that allows us to address any of those things, the short-term things that come up, like, hey, I'm saving to buy a car next year, or I'm finishing residency and within 2 years, I'd like to buy a house. That's kind of shorter term. Or maybe midterm, hey, we're in the next 8 to 10 years, my kid's going to go to college and I'd like to be able to help them with that. So the principles help position us so that we're ready for any of those things. As far as long-term planning, it kind of brings us back to a prior question, which is what's the difference between retirement and financial freedom? And I think they're totally different, actually. The fact is, the word retirement, I invite everybody to look it up in the dictionary. The word retirement means to quit. It means to quit active working life. It's an age. It's based on an age, which actually has caused major problems in our country because if we look at retirees in the United States, there's actually a really good study that's done every year, a report. It's called the Retirement Confidence Survey. And in 2018, the Retirement Confidence Survey said that 67% of retirees said that Social Security retirement income was, quote, a major source of income. That amount of income coming from Social Security is, at most
Scary.
somewhere around $2,500. Yeah, $2,500, less than $3,000 a month. So what we're saying, what that study is saying is that there's a ton of people, by far, 2/3 of the American retirees in our country are completely dependent on Social Security retirement. To me, that does not equate to financial freedom. Yes, they're retired. They're totally dependent, however. So a person could actually be retired and not financially free, and a person could be financially free and not retired. So
Right.
they're not really the same thing. And I think, as far as, this is my bias as far as financial planning goes, but I don't know that it takes a lot of skill and knowledge to help someone retire, but it does take a lot of skill and knowledge to help someone become financially free because retiring is just quitting at a certain age. Being financially free means that you, according to my definition, means that you have assets that are producing enough income to sustain your chosen lifestyle. And that can occur before age 59 and a half. It could be occur, at 67. It could occur at 45. Financial freedom can be a lot sooner than later. I have a good example of that. One of my clients about a year and a half ago, he was he still is in the oil and gas industry, but he was a part owner of a specific company, oil and gas company, and they sold their company to a big hedge fund. And he walked away with $21 million. He's financially free. The interest that he gets from a bank account with that money is more than he was earning per year in his salary. So,
Okay.
he's
No.
financially free at this point. But now he's back to work. He started another venture doing the same thing. He invested a bunch of his money into that. And so he's financially free, but not retired.
So it took us 35 minutes to get into a rub. So I
That's what we're wanting.
It took longer.
See what the difference is. What's the difference? Right.
Well, because, okay, first of all, to retire well is hard. To
I
retire
agree.
is not hard. You could be a bum and retire, right? You can call yourself retired if you're going to live on Social Security. Because if you're going to live on Social Security alone, that is. And let me just chime in real quick on Social Security. Do we know why Social Security started? Anybody know? Kyle probably does. Billy does, and I'll tell you. It started in the 40s when people were coming back from the World War. Roosevelt said, "Hey, we've got too many people coming back from war. We got to get some of these people out of the workforce." So they started Social Security to incent people to quit working so that they could fill the jobs with younger people. That's the only way retirement even started. So it hasn't even been around 100 years. So we both kind of agree on retirement. But my question for Kyle and how we go back and forth, and I'll answer your goals question, Billy. So the question for Kyle is, and I want you to think about it because I want to explain how we do it, and then I'll come back and let's go back and forth. So, because where did the guy put his $21 million? He had to invest it somewhere. He didn't, unless he put it back into another company. Where's the money? And he ain't putting it in the bank. You shouldn't keep all your money in the bank, right? So your goals are based upon your goals drive where you invest your money. So if you've got a short-term goal of buying a house, yes, that's going to be in the bank, or it's a money market if you're talking less than a year. Now, if you're going to go longer than that, and this is where, again, our difference is, we do something with buckets. I call them buckets because people understand asset allocation, but if I say buckets, everybody gets buckets. So we have a cash bucket, an income bucket, a short-term bucket, and a long-term bucket. Cash is cash, right? So cash is the bank. Income is money that we're going to use for freedom in the future. There's only a few places you can put income money, and we're going to talk about this next week, I'm sure. But now we're talking about annuities, real estate, dividend paying stocks. You got short-term money where you could have maybe a 60-40 blend between stocks and bonds. Long-term money is predominantly stocks, maybe some bonds, but mutual funds, ETFs, index funds, that kind of stuff. What drives it is your time horizon. So if your goal is less than 2 years, it goes into cash. If your goal is income, typically people, when they're going to live off their income, they want it to come in forever, right? We don't want that to stop. Short-term money is 3 to 5 years. Long-term money for me is 7 years plus. So if we invest for our time horizon, we won't have an issue. But if we don't, we're going to have an issue. If we put all the money in the same pot, which most of the experts out there say, and I'm going to tell you they're freaking wrong, don't listen to them. You don't want to put all your money into one pot at a 60-40 portfolio. You got to spread it out, and you got to put it in different places. Some of it should go back into your own company. Some of it should be in the bank. Some of it should be in the market. Some of it should be in annuities or insurance products. We need all of it to create a good portfolio. So where did the guy put his 21 million?
Well, I don't know if you want me to answer that.
I do. Unless you don't want to.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So I would say that, again, this is a big difference, right? So here's the reality. Financial institutions have an insatiable appetite for having control of our money. And so what they really want is immediately for you to invest that money. And in my opinion, this thing that they call risk tolerance testing is designed to actually put a person's money in as high of risk as possible at all times. And so this is why you hear phrases or things like, hey, when you're young, you should take as much risk as you can because you have time to overcome losses, et cetera. And as you get older, you should reduce your risk and diversify into less risky things. I don't buy into any of that at all. The reality is financial institutions, here we have 4 rules that we talk about for financial institutions, and all financial institutions, I'm not talking just Wall Street, I'm talking banks, I'm talking insurance companies, all of them. They have the goal of assets under management. Basically, they want the money to go one direction to them, and they want to hold on to it as long as possible. That's their goal. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's what's real. No one's in the back room of those companies saying, hey, how can I give Billy the most money possible? They're actually talking the opposite. They're saying, how can we get more of Billy's money? And how can we get it every time he gets paid? And so, with this particular client, as soon as he sells his ownership in the oil and gas company, guess who's there? Goldman Sachs. They're like vultures, right? They're like, okay, we're just waiting for this sale to happen, and then we're going to swoop in and wine and dine and do everything we can to get them to invest their money with us, which is what they've tried to do with my client. Luckily, he understood these principles that I've taught him, and he's been able to be resilient. But they constantly are badgering him to get to an 80% of his money invested in the market. And he constantly tells them, I can't even sleep at night with the percentage I have with you in the market. And his wife is saying, I don't want any with you with Goldman Sachs. And so, but they just run under the assumption that you should have all of your money invested at all times. So here's my philosophy on investing.
That's wirehouses. I'll agree with you, and I'll give you the wire. That's not me.
Yep.
So don't put me in that category, because
I didn't. I'm going to say everybody but John.
Thank you. That would be. I appreciate that. Because
So
you got to go with what is comfortable with the client first.
Right.
That
So
to me is the most important.
So again, it goes back to the criteria that we help our clients understand, which is the 3 rules for investing. Rule number 1 is invest in what you know. Invest in your expertise. If you guys think about what causes an increase in risk or a decrease in risk, it has much less to do with rate of return than it has to do with your knowledge of that thing. So if I were to go practice dentistry on somebody, that would be very high risk because I have no idea what I'm doing. But the same, the same project could be performed by one of my dental clients, and they're experts in that field. It's a low risk thing for them, but it's the same project. So it's actually knowledge of that thing that reduces risk or increases risk. The second one is control. So having control or influence over the outcome. So as I talk with this particular client, my recommendation is invest in what you know. His name's Rick. I said, Rick, don't feel like you have to rush. You're financially free right now. Just from, not that we feel like we should have all of our money in the bank for the next, for the rest of your life. I don't think that's a good idea necessarily. But you also don't have to rush into investing into something just because, you're being told it should be sitting in investments. And he didn't know this actually when he first sold the oil and gas company, the first one. He didn't know that less than 2 years later he would be starting another venture with oil and gas, and he would have the opportunity to invest pretty much any amount he wanted to in that new venture, which is something he has significantly more confidence in than putting the money into mutual funds or stocks or bonds, things that he's not an expert in, things that he has no control over the outcome. And number two, aren't really designed to produce any type of cash flow to him. So that's, as people are thinking about financial freedom instead of retirement, they're not looking for a nest egg. They're not looking to build a predicted, future prediction of a number that you need to have. It's about producing cash flow now from what I call real assets so that he continue to become more and more financially free to do anything that they choose to do.
Okay, wait, let me add one thing then. I was going to talk about how these places are trying to capture your money. There's no doubt about it. But they all don't make money off your money. So the stock market charges you a fee and you pay a fee. Banks want to capture more of your money so they can lend it out. They make money on loans. Insurance companies make money by taking the money that you invest, giving you a fair rate of return, and they invest it in their portfolio, and they're working just to make a couple of points off of a lot of money. So they all make money in three different ways. They're not trying to capture more assets. Well, they're trying to grow. But the only way they're going to capture more assets is if you are making money. If you're not making money, then don't do it, right? So we got to make money.
Right.
The other thing that I was going to just point out was you have to invest for your risk tolerance, right? So we have to look at how much risk you want to take. And if you can't sleep, it doesn't matter how good the plan is. It doesn't matter how good the investment is. It's not a good investment. You got to find a balance between what you can sustain. So one of the biggest things I say to people, they're like, well, how do I know it's a great plan? Can you tolerate the ups and downs of this plan? It's going to go, and we have a system and a process that we take people through based upon their risk score. Kyle is correct. You could be a moderate investor, and to be a moderate investor and for it to still be suitable, you could lose 35% and not get sued. So if you came to me and said, I'm a moderate investor and your portfolio goes down 35%, you can't come after me because that's what the guidelines are. 35% is a pretty big number to lose. That's a lot of money. The other thing, I'm going to chime in with Warren Buffett. What's one of his number one rules? Never, ever lose money. So we want to see if we can find places where we take and we don't lose money. It's not the one who takes the biggest risk. It's the one who loses the least, right? Over a longer period of time.
So during the goal so let me pick it back on during the goal process when you're helping develop this plan, are you advising them or what are you saying as it relates to risk and return and reward? When someone says my expectation is, I've run some numbers and if I earn 10% in the market every single year, this is what I'll have and it'll be good. Are you kind of pushing back against that as they share these goals to kind of go?
For me, it depends on your bucket. Right. So if we're looking at the cash bucket now has finally crept up. We should get 4.5%, 4%. That's like the bank, safe money, money markets, high yield interest accounts, that kind of stuff. Your income bucket, we use dividend stocks, real estate, we use annuities. You should get somewhere around 6%, between 5 and 6%. Short-term bucket, balanced portfolio is probably somewhere between 6 and 7. Our long-term buckets are all returning somewhere around 10%. Depending upon how long you look. People think, oh my gosh, I should get 30% for the rest of my life. No, the 20-year average in the stock market is 6.5%. 10-year average is probably closer to 10%. But again, it depends on your time horizon. So you have to be realistic in what you said expectations, Billy. That's a perfect word.
Right.
We have to set realistic expectations. So with Kyle's approach, you're going to do some hands-on hard work. Well, it might not be hard, but you're going to do some work, right? You're going to do hands-on. With mine, we're going to create a plan and the strategy built around your goals, but it's going to be more of that hands-off approach where I'll take care of it for you. Well, now you got to find somebody you trust, and that creates a whole nother stuff. You know what I mean? So there's other barriers that come into play when working with a financial advisor that you have to kind of work through. The other thing that I'll point out for people, especially, I don't know how old they are on here, but we started doing something for the younger demographic. We're calling it the Lifestyle Builders Program. We came out with that program because, unfortunately, in my experience, it seems like if you are between the ages of 30 and 45, a lot of the financial advisors are probably going to be your peers, and your peers are going to come to you and they're going to say, yeah, hey, I got this great product. Well, they're trying to get a higher commission product because they're not fee-based only, right? Or they've got to make money. So if all you have is a hammer, everybody's a nail. And they're going to push you towards products that may not be most suitable for you because they have to generate an income. We're trying to change that. We're trying to come in and say, hey, let us teach you, let us educate you. You can make a wise decision, but here's some products that you need, and here's some cheaper ways to get to the market. Because unfortunately, that is a black eye, I think, in our industry, or at least on the people who do what I do. We get a bad rep because, you know, a lot of times people are pushing people into products that they shouldn't be in because it's not under their expectation, it's not in their time frame, it's not in their risk tolerance.
Do you, Kyle, in those returns, is that what you're kind of targeting also?
I think there's a pretty big philosophical difference here in this area, because the reason financial planners have, you know, these average rates of return that they talk about for the different buckets is because they need those in order to do calculations to say, okay, this is how we're going to get to your nest egg in the future that we have to have. We don't play that game at all. Number one, because I don't think you can actually predict what a person needs in the future, nor can you predict what rates of return will be. Like, just as an example, savings rates right now, yes, they're over 4%, but in the last 20 years, how many years have they been over 4%? Probably 2 out of the last 20 years, right?
Negatory.
In
They
the
were
last,
in the 6s in the 80s and 90s.
no,
I
I said in the
20
last
years.
20 years.
You said 20.
We go 20.
Yeah.
They were still in the fives.
In fact, the 16-year average in savings has been 0.7%. So we're abnormally high, and we like where it's at right now as far as savings goes. That's awesome. It's not going to stay that way. The Fed's already talking about lowering rates. Our goal is not to build a nest egg with principles-based planning. Our goal is to produce cash flow from assets. So we don't need to try and predict rates of return. We're not looking at trying to grow a nest egg. What we're trying to do, we don't even really care so much about the fair market value of the assets. What we really care about is what's the cash flow from that asset. So for example, somebody could own a house, right? Somebody could buy a house that's worth $5 million, right? And they live in that house, but they might not be financially free because they have a $5 million house because there's no cash flow coming from that house, right? But they could also own $1 million car wash that produces $150,000 a year of cash flow, positive cash flow. Is that, you know, what really matters to the person? I can tell you, you know, financial institutions, I think, are important to watch and to look at and to learn from, because they really teach us one thing and they practice something totally different. So they teach us to put our money into something and leave it there and try and build a nest egg and leave it there for decades and supposedly compound interest, which we could address why that's not actually true over time. But
I want to hear this one too.
in the meantime, what they care about is something called velocity of money. What they're trying to do is get movement of the money, right? They set up a mortgage for you, Billy, and then 2 months later, what do they do with that mortgage?
I guess
Do they keep it?
Right?
They sell it.
No.
They sell it. They don't really want that, you know, tiny stream of income from you over time. What they're going to do is sell it. And by the way, they do get compounding interest on that mortgage that they sold you, unlike in investments that we can participate in. And so they sell that because when they get it back, what do they do with that money? They go get more money from the Federal Reserve, about $9 for every one. Okay. And then they go do that again and set up 10 times the number of mortgages with 10 times the amount of money. And then what they want to do is get that money back. They set up the mortgages, and guess what they do again? They package those mortgages up after a few months and sell them again. What they care about is something called velocity of money, and it's all about cash flow. It's all about getting the money back. They don't really care about, what's the value of those things. If you think about business owners, there are rarely any business owners out there who know what the value of their business is. But do you know what they do know? They know the cash flow. They know the cash flow because the cash flow from their business is what actually matters. That's what gives you the capability, right, to do something. And
So is that
so
what generates the financial freedom you're talking
that's
about?
right. That's
Is
right.
the
It's
cash flow.
financial free.
Okay.
Yep. Financial freedom is all about cash flow. If you ever read any of Robert Kiyosaki's stuff, which I would encourage your readers to read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Who Took My Money, all of these other good books that he set up. He's like, people ask him all the time about what his net worth is. And he says, I don't care what my net worth is. What I care about is that $100,000 a month I'm getting from my real estate. I don't care what the whole portfolio is worth. That doesn't matter to me. It's the cash flow that comes from it that matters. So that's the philosophy that we've adopted with the principles-based planning approach.
I have a couple of questions. When it comes to goals, is part of your focus helping clients develop some kind of work-life balance and create enough, I don't know, financial cushion or whatever, where they can, I feel like my clients, they work really hard. I'm not sure how much control. It seems to vary in terms of control they have over their schedule and when they're on call and if they're working weekends. And, if they're not there, they're not getting paid, right? A lot of times they get paid to show up. They got to be in clinic or they got to be doing procedures to get paid. So if they take a 2-week vacation, that's 2 weeks when they're not getting paid. Now I get, the argument is they have PTO and all that, but whatever that productivity that they're generating is not being generated. So how do you discuss work-life balance and making sure that you kind of think long-term, actually have an opportunity to get financially free and enjoy what you do without having to feel like you have to do it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say that comes back to living below your means a little bit and carving that in there and having enough assets to where you can say, we're building and generating income and or savings or accumulation in these different buckets. So we've got to feel comfortable to have a balance. You can't work nonstop. It's actually, I can't tell you, maybe you guys have experienced this as well, but I think I generate more business when I go on vacation than when I sit in the office. For whatever reason, it seems like just more stuff happens when I check out of the office than when I am in the office. So I think
What do you think?
Work-life balance is critical.
Kyle?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the type of things that we encourage our clients to invest in, so we call them real assets that produce income. And so, as a physician's going along and they're saving and they're acquiring assets that are producing income to them, they're becoming, as time goes on, less and less dependent on their income that they're earning from their job. And as a result, they have freedom, right? They could say, I want to work less shifts, or I want to, I'd rather, do something else that I might get paid less, but because I've got assets that are producing income, I don't have to worry about changing my lifestyle. I'm going to be able to continue my lifestyle. So it's really about, if we do what financial institutions want us to do, we're going to send our money somewhere. They're going to get cash flow for themselves, but they're not going to send cash flow back to you. Almost no financial tools that exist, very few, are designed to produce income to people before age 59 and a half. And it's by design. It's because they want to hang on to it.
I don't think you could say that.
I can say that.
What would you say, John?
By far. So let me qualify that. Why I'm saying
stock,
that.
You could do a bond,
I would say very few stocks actually pay dividends.
I can
right?
think of a handful right now. If you
Right.
want,
I'm not saying they don't
Right.
exist. I mean, I've got a client that owns a ton of Exxon stock, for example, and makes
right.
tons of money on that. So yes, there are, but by far the majority of them don't pay dividends. They kind of followed Apple and other companies who decided at some point in time, hey, you know what? The best idea is for us not to pay dividends. So a lot of them don't. Mutual funds don't really produce an income stream. They don't send a check to people. What they do is they send a 1099 to people every year that they have to pay taxes on. Bonds do produce income, but most people don't buy bonds. They buy bond funds. And usually those are sitting inside of retirement accounts, which are designed not to produce income until after age 59 and a half, because if you do take income, you're penalized and taxed. So
No, it depends
if
on
we're
how
going to
you
be
hold it.
honest, if we're going to be honest about it, by far the majority of people who are investing in the market in traditional means, they're putting their money into retirement accounts, IRAs, SEPs, SIMPLs, 401ks, 403bs, etc. And they're purposely putting their money into something that they will be penalized if they get any income from it before age 59 and a half. That's true. So what I'm suggesting is that financial institutions have objectives, which is to get our money and to hold on to it as long as possible. And the products, of course, that they create are designed to accomplish that objective. It's hard to argue that. The things that we recommend our clients invest in are things that financial institutions can't sell. So you can't sell somebody's partnership in a orthopedic surgeon facility or a dental clinic or an oral surgery practice or rental properties or a franchise, a Chick-fil-A franchise or a car wash or things like that. So, Wall Street wants to put the blinders on us, and actually just all financial institutions, they want to put the blinders on us and say, hey, look, if you want to invest, it has to be with us and with our things, and everything else we're going to call alternative. And I think that's actually totally opposite.
I don't
John,
John,
I'm
go.
just saying we can't put a blanketed cover on that. And you can hold funds. Yeah, some of the largest funds and stock funds might be retirement accounts, but you can hold a non-IRA or just a brokerage account. I mean, that most of our cash income short-term buckets aren't IRA money, right?
Yeah.
So you could still have a long-term portfolio, a short-term portfolio, all of that stuff that you can access prior to 59 and a half all day long. I never heard where he put his 21 million.
Oh, yeah. 2.5 million Goldman Sachs convinced him because they've inundated him. He's got 2.5 million in bonds just from that portfolio and the interest he's getting on his savings, which all the rest of it is in savings, actually. And it's producing way more income than he was making before. And then, what I encouraged him to do because of this new adventure, I said, well, how much can you invest in this new adventure? And he was originally planning to invest $100,000 in the new venture, and he put in $1.5 million into it. So,
we could have
I disagree.
I can average more than 4.
Interesting. Yeah.
But averages don't
yeah,
matter.
but not on a guaranteed basis. You can't.
No, that's
Maybe at
good.
some point.
That's good.
Okay, here we go.
All right, let's tie it up.
Tie it up.
We're done here. Thanks, guys. I hopefully there's at least there's some banter, which is good. I love that because these are different philosophies. I think it's important for there to be exposure to that and for at least let people decide for themselves at least get some idea and learn what these different approaches do and what the pluses and minuses are. So we'll get together again for session 3, where we'll get into the strategies and we'll get into some of the products. We'll go deeper into these tools that we were talking about. And then we'll wrap it up with talking about risk management and look forward to doing that because protection is important. So thanks for everybody being here. Hope you found it helpful. Feel free to email me with any questions and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. That's it for today. Thank you for your time as always. The next episode, we will cover session 3 of the educational series called Cover Your Assets from All Angles. The title of that session will be Financial Tools and Strategies, a very popular one. Plan to tune in. In the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, any way I can help. Text me at 704-270-2376, 704-270-2376. Grateful as always for your time. Thank you and take care.
Thanks for listening to the Cover Your Assets podcast, a Work P2P production. New episodes drop every 2 weeks. If you've enjoyed the conversation, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. For more tips and advice, visit the website and YouTube channel. Check the show notes for links. Join us next time for another episode dedicated to helping physicians like you get your disability insurance right and protect your way of life.